What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Bass Fishing Tips YouTube channel. Man, I'm super excited to get today's video started, but before we get into it, I just want to first start by saying thanks for sticking with me through this super long hiatus that we took in between videos. For a lot of you guys that know me and have been around my other channel, Alex Red Fishing, for a long time, you'll know that that is my full-time gig. That's my full-time focus when it comes to YouTube content creation, and where I put most of my effort and time into content making is over there. You know, we've got the videos, we've got the podcast, we've got everything that goes with Alex Red Fishing, and then this was kind of my side project. And this side project got put on the back burner for a little while just because of business life and personal life stuff, and it just was one of those things that the way that I had this structured isn't exactly how I like to make content. I tried the once a day daily tip kind of thing, and that just doesn't jive with what I like to do, how I like to make content, and how I like to put together, you know, information and present it to you guys. And so instead of doing the once a day style content on this channel, we're gonna go to once a week. But these once a week videos are gonna be deep dives into the different baits, techniques, seasonal patterns, everything that you guys need to know to catch more bass from the boat, bank, or the kayak, or wherever you guys happen to be fishing. And so welcome back to Bass Fishing Tips. And let's get started in this video, and we'll keep these videos going from here on out. But anyway, so today's video is going to be about the top baits for February bass fishing. Now, I know some of the country right now still has ice. You guys are ice fishing. You're still dealing with ice, dealing with extremely cold temperatures. And it's the same down here in East Tennessee, except minus the ice. Now, incredibly, this year we have seen quite a bit of ice. I actually saw chunks of frozen floating ice in the middle of my lakes the other day. Saw 38-degree water temperatures. I saw 36 on another lake. And so this has been an extremely cold and abnormally cold year across the board for a lot of people. And even looking into the deep south, just a couple weeks ago, we had a blizzard. My buddy from Louisiana actually had 6 inches of snow at his house. And so it's just a very different year across the board for as far as what the weather is actually doing. And that's going to kind of determine some of the bait picks that I actually picked for the month of February this year. But for you guys that do have ice right now, I do apologize. Spring is coming very, very soon. But these are great bait recommendations for as soon as that water thaws enough to get out on it. These are those super, super early baits. And that's kind of where we're at right now in the south, and anywhere kind of that has super cold water like we're experiencing right now, as we're getting into the very end of winter here, the deep depths of winter, the coldest temperatures that we're going to see all year, and thus our water temperatures are reflecting that, and thus the bass are reflecting that as well, in what they want to eat, how they want to eat, and the things that I'm throwing to get them to eat. And so let's start with my first bait, and these are kind of in no particular order, but this is definitely going to be top of the list for me this time of year to actually get fish to bite, and that is going to be the old Alabama rig, the chandelier as I like to call it. This is an absolutely incredible bait for getting bites and for putting fish into the boat. Really, it doesn't matter any time of the year. I mean, I know guys who throw these things all year long, but definitely in the winter when you've got some really finicky, just lethargic bass that don't want to eat a lot, just the size, the vibration, the water displacement, everything about this bait will get a fish to bite when not much else will. Now, right off the rip with the old Alabama rig, understand that each state has different regulations on how you can actually set up your Alabama rig. So before you pick up an Alabama rig, or you go buy one off omnia.com, make sure you look at your regulations and that your Alabama rig fits in with your state's regulations, because I don't want you guys getting a ticket for just making a silly mistake like buying the wrong Alabama rig. So here in Tennessee, we can have 3 hooks and 2 teasers. So you guys will see I got a hook here, and then a hook down here, but then these 2 baits up here have no hooks in them. So that's what I mean when we have 3 hooks and then teaser baits. And a lot of people will either choose to use either the swim bait that they've used on the rest of their Alabama rig as their teaser. I've seen some people that choose to use blades instead of swim baits. It just kind of depends on how you want to do it. But for me, I like to kind of have some uniformity in my Alabama rig. I feel as though it makes it swim just a little bit better. And so that's why I go with swim baits as teasers instead of blades. And the thing about these swim baits, is that, like I said, that uniformity helps it to swim really, really well, helps to balance it out really, really well. And a lot of the times the bass aren't going to eat these anyway. And so you can run them on there and not have to worry about losing them or anything like that. Now, when it comes to my Alabama rigs, the ones that I like the most are smaller body Alabama rigs. And I know what you're saying. You're probably looking at that going, Alex, there's nothing small about that. But in the world of Alabama rigs, there's really, really big Alabama rigs. There's a little bit smaller Alabama rigs, and then there's smaller Alabama rigs. And I like some of the smaller ones. So this is a Shane Bates Blades of Glory Alabama rig, one of my favorites. This is just, it's a good Alabama rig. It's put together well, it's strong, the components are well, and I don't have to worry about it falling apart. And then another one is this Hog Farm. This is the BFL micro rig. And so it's just a little bit smaller rig, smaller overall profile, just kind of is a little bit more compact. And I kind of keep that going through the entire setup on the Alabama rig. And we'll get into that here in just one second. But one thing with this little Hog Farmer rig that I love is that it comes pre-rigged with little bitty screw locks on 2 of the arms. So like I said, I like using swim baits as my teasers on the arms that don't have hooks, and those little screw locks are what I actually use. And so that's how I'm actually putting that on that Alabama rig right there, is you just put that little screw lock on there and then screw that screw lock into the nose of that swim bait, and that's what's actually keeping that small swim bait on that arm of that Alabama rig without it falling off, but also not having a hook in it as well. Now, when it comes to the heads and the baits that I'm actually using, like I said, I like to keep it smaller. I like to go more finesse. And so I never use more than an 1/8 ounce head on my Alabama rig. These are Berkley Fusion 19 heads, 1/8 ounce. This is, I believe, a 2/0 hook. Yeah, so a little 2/0 hook, which is perfect for the swim bait that I choose, which we'll talk about here in just a second. But also, those 1/8 ounce heads allow me to really be finesse with this thing and crank it really, really slow. And that is a key this time of year, is moving super duper slow. You guys can actually see it's getting cold out here in the beer barn. We had the heater running, but it didn't help much because it's freezing. But being able to creep that thing really, really slow, just hovering it right above the bottom, is the key to a lot of times getting those fish to bite. Because a lot of times this time of year, these bass are going to be locked on the bottom or locked up against whatever cover or structure that they're sitting against, and they're just going to be chilling. And they're going to be waiting for something to make a mistake and get close enough to them that they can just lash out, grab it, and then just settle back right into their position. That's what that cold water does to these fish, because they are cold-blooded creatures. I actually did a podcast with my friend Mr. Drew Gregory yesterday. He won a tournament out in Lake Havasu, water in the low 50s. Again, it's warm, but it is the middle of the desert. It's Arizona, so it's going to be a little bit warmer. But the smallmouth that he was catching were just sunning themselves, locked right on the bottom in a big school, and he had to hop a little bitty swim bait by them to get them to eat, because even those fish, 50 degrees is cold to them, locked them to the bottom, put them in this kind of self-preservation mode, and made them where they didn't want to move very much. And it's the same thing with bass all across the country right now. And those little 1/8 ounce heads help me to just keep that thing as close to the bottom as I can without digging it into the bottom, without locking it into the bottom, and being able to, like, if I come up on something, just kind of hop it over the top of it and keep that Alabama rig just creeping right along the bottom. Now, another key is going to be the swim bait that you use. Now, this time of year, again, creeping that bait. And so I want a swim bait that can activate and that can swim, and I can get all the action out of that bait while creeping it along at those super slow speeds. There's a couple different options that you can choose from. One that is like synonymous across the world and across the board with all kinds of anglers is the Kitech brand. Those little bitty Kitech swim baits, they're awesome swim baits because at super slow speeds, those tails are just going to keep on swinging no matter what. The only issue I've ever ran into with the Kitechs is that they fall apart really, really easy. And so a lot of the times it's a one and done bait. And what I mean by that is you get one fish on it and then it's done. Another bait that I love to use are these paddling power stingers. Now these things are really, really cool. This is a Berkley bait. And what I like about it is it has that honeycomb tail design. Now this honeycomb tail design is really, really cool. It's in this bait, it's in the coal shad, it's in a couple different baits from Berkley. And what it allows Berkley to do is the body of the bait is really, really tough, hard plastic. It's really hard to rip it. It's really hard to tear it up. And so it's going to last fish after fish after fish. And they're able to run that same plastic through the rest of the body of that bait, but get that action out of the bait at any speed, including those really slow speeds, because of that honeycomb design. And so it's just literally exactly as the name says, it's a honeycomb design. And as you guys can see, that tail has got all the flop that it needs, and even at the slowest, just, I mean, barely creeping its speeds, that paddle tail is going to keep on paddling, and it's going to get those fish to eat. And so, yeah, that's my number one bait for February. Like I said, no particular order, but if I was going to pick one up first, if I wanted something that I could have some confidence in to go out and fish, this is going to be it. And the way that I've got it set up allows me to fish it how I like to fish it. It also allows for you guys that are on the bank that are worried about getting it hung up to be able to fish that thing as well, because these lighter heads, this smaller rig, allows you to be able to get it over that cover a little bit easier, keep it from getting hung up, keep it from digging into the bottom, and just fish it a little bit more efficiently across the board. So Alabama rig, don't sleep on it. It is so good this time of year. The next one is going to be a little bitty finesse football style jig. Now, I have been obsessing over these over the past few years. They're absolutely killers, and it's just these little finesse footballs. Now, these are different than your traditional football jig because they have the same weight as a traditional football jig. Both of these are half-ounce jigs, and you can even get these things in 3/4 and 1 ounce. But the difference is that little bitty finesse hook as well as that little bitty finesse profile. I mean, you guys can just tell how small that jig actually is. And, you know, I'll hold this one up next to my hand. I mean, just a little bitty, almost peanut style or peanut sized jig, but it's got that half-ounce head on it, which allows you to fish this thing deep. It allows you to keep bottom contact. It allows you to really feel what's going on down there on the bottom while still having that super tiny finesse profile that will get those more lethargic bass to eat. And that's really where I've been using this thing, is just this time of year, moving into the spring, anytime we have really adverse conditions, whether it's post-front high bluebird, whether it's these extreme cold water conditions that we've been dealing with, that little finesse jig will absolutely kill it. Now, there's two different ones that I like. This is the Kitech little finesse jig. I actually forgot what this is called. It's like the Kitech K2 or something like that, but it's a little finesse jig. I'll make sure and link it down below so you guys can check it out. Any of the baits that I talk about, linked in the description, linked in the pinned comment, go check them out. And then this one is actually my favorite. This is the Bass Union little finesse jig. This thing actually comes with living rubber skirt, and they just do a really good job because the hook in this thing is still that little bitty tiny hook, but it's actually a little bit more bulked up, and so it allows me to throw it on casting gear with a lot more confidence that I'm not going to actually bend that hook out or anything like that. And, you know, I usually pair this up with some sort of crawl bait, usually either a Berkley chigger crawl, and then sometimes I'll pair it up with a chunk. It kind of just depends. I've seen times when they want the chigger crawl, I've seen times when they want the chunk, but regardless of what trailer that you decide to choose, just make sure it's something small, it's something finesse, it's something that matches up with this jig really, really well, because I think a lot of people don't understand when they get this jig, like, that's only a 2/0 hook, that's only a 1/0 hook. I mean, these are very small hooks, so they can't take a ton of plastic on there, but regardless of that, they are absolute little killers. And what's really cool about these things is that when the bass get them, they get them. I really wish I kind of understood the ergonomics as to why that happened, but man, every time that a bass bites this thing and I hook them, I'm digging it out of their throat, I'm digging it out of their mouth, and I always get a good hook into them. And I think a lot of that just has to do with that smaller profile. You know, there's not much there, and that bass can just swim up and get that thing, and you get a good hook into them. I have a ton of confidence that once I hook them, they're coming into the boat or the kayak or wherever I'm fighting them into, and it's just an awesome option even for me here. You know, a lot of people will look at this and they'll go like, you know, I bet you can't fish that thing around trees. Bet you can't fish all these different places. This is one of my favorite baits to just kind of slowly pull through a laydown, slowly pull beside laydowns, using that bigger chunk rock or those transitional rocks from, you know, big rock to small rock, wherever it may be. That's one of my favorite tools this time of year. And that's really what I focus on, is like, anywhere that there's transitions or that there's something in the water, whether it be a bluff with a log laid on it, or we're transitioning on a bluff from like bigger kind of stone and boulders to smaller stone and sand. That's really what I'm looking for in this time of year that's going to hold a whole bunch of fish. And a lot of the times if you catch one fish out of there, you're going to catch multiple fish out of there, and that little jig is an awesome tool to get those fish to bite. Now another tool kind of on that same vein, thinking on those like kind of bluffed out walls and that more vertical structure, is going to be a money badger, and in particular a money badger. Now there's a lot of great small body crankbaits out there, and if they exist I'll probably use them. Strike King 3XD, Bandit 300, 200, 100, Wiggle Warts. I mean, you go down the list, I've got pretty much every crankbait that's ever been made because I love small body crankbaits. But if you guys have watched Alex Rudd Fishing any, you know that the money badger is one of my go-to staple baits this time of year to get fish to bite them. And you can see this old money badger, he has seen some better days. That one has caught some fish. Probably need to put that one on the wall of fame. But this is a bait that every single year I literally catch hundreds and hundreds of fish on. Last December, I kept count. Just in the month of December, I caught over 300 fish on the money badger. Just absolutely incredible bait that gets work done. And what I love about it this time of year, again, focusing on kind of those bluffed out walls, that more vertical structure, that's really where I'm going to fish this thing. And, you know, I don't really focus on actually hitting the bottom with this thing. More what I'm doing is I'm just tracing a bluff wall. So you got to imagine, like, this is a bluff wall. That crankbait may like tick it every now and then, but for the most part, I'm just tracing down that bluff wall and then turning that crankbait up and bringing it back up to the boat. And a lot of the times when you watch my videos where I'm actually fishing this bait, throwing it straight in the bank and fishing it straight out, and that's actually what I'm doing, is I'm trying to keep that bait kind of just tracing that bluff wall, keeping it in the strike zone until it hits its maximum diving depth, and then I'm actually bringing it up. And they're either going to eat it somewhere here, or they're going to eat it as it starts to turn up and come towards the boat. That's where I get most of my bites. Now, money badger in particular, and I actually talked about this in an Alex Rudd Fishing video just a couple days ago, what I love about it is the fact that I can stall this bait out. I can pause it. And this time of year, when I'm dealing with extremely cold water, stop and go retrieve is the absolute key for me to get them to bite the money badger or any small body crankbait for that matter, but in particular the money badger. And what's really, really cool about this thing is that it suspends. And so I can crank that bait down there and stop it, and it's going to stop and then just keep on going again. It's going to make that pause just like a jerkbait will. And a lot of the times that's the key to actually getting these fish to bite. And unlike a jerkbait that I can't really do a super effective job of tracing down those bluff walls with, I can do that with this crankbait, and I can do it really, really effectively just because the depth at which it dives, the angle at which it dives, and just the ability to get down deeper faster and not have to have as much distance in between me and an object to get it down to that maximum diving depth, but still be able to crank that thing down there, pause that bait, have that thing just suspend in that fish's face, and then start up again. And a lot of the times this time of year, I would say 90% of the time, those fish either eat that thing on the pause or they eat it as soon as I reactivate that bait. And so they either eat it here or they eat it and then I start it back and they lash out and they eat it. And that's what I love about this bait. That little flash disc technology in there, and just the way that this bait is made allows it to suspend. It allows those fish to get a really good look at it this time of year and for them to absolutely crush it. And it puts so many hundreds and hundreds of fish in the boat. I cannot tell you guys enough about Money Badger Blaze 6.25, Special Red Cross 6.25, and Spring Cross 62.5. In that order, those are my three favorite colors of this bait, and I have put thousands of fish into the boat with this bait up to this point, and it's just absolutely incredible. And an absolutely incredible bait that I love very, very much. Now, kind of thinking down the same thought and kind of vein of thought as suspending baits, we got to talk about a jerkbait. And like I said, I like the Money Badger for the more bluffed out stuff because it allows me to just fish those depth ranges a lot more effectively. But sometimes we're not fishing in those depth ranges. Sometimes we're fishing on more flatter stuff. We're fishing with bass that are suspended up a little bit higher in the column. You know, some of these lakes around me, some of the highland reservoirs are more riverine, meaning they're just straight up and down. I got to fish something like a crankbait there. But other highland reservoirs are really flat and kind of laid out more, where you got these big rolling points, big long, just tapering points that taper out. You've got these big boulder fields and stuff like that. And so, you know, you have a boulder field at the maximum depth is 8 feet across the entire boulder field. and that thing's just not super effective in actually fishing that, whereas the jerk bait will absolutely kill it in those scenarios. And again, I love this bait because I'm able to make it suspend. I'm able to make it pause. And everybody thinks when you think fishing a jerk bait, you know, it's that jerk, jerk, pause, jerk, 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 pause. And that's exactly what I'm doing with this bait this time of year. And really when I'm thinking about like jerk bait colors, what I'm looking for, a lot of the times I'm looking for either a straight like white or a bone or something that isn't translucent, and then I'm kind of looking for something that's like a semi-translucent, and see, you can even, the camera's having a hard time focusing on that one. It's like a semi-translucent, semi-chrome kind of color. And the way that I determine which one that I'm going to throw is the more opaque colors I'm going to throw in a little bit dirtier water or on cloudy days. The chromes and the clears I'm going to throw in clearer water and on sunny days. Now, one thing to keep in mind this time of year, and we're going to start seeing as we get later into February, is the water's going to start dirtying up. A lot of this is, you know, snow and ice is going to start melting. We're going to have a little bit more of those rains start moving in, and we're just inherently going to have dirty water influx into these bodies of water. Don't sleep on a jerk bait as a semi-dirty water bait. Some of the best days of bass fishing I've ever had in my life is fishing an all white jerkbait just like that in a little bit dirtier water. This is a loud, aggressive bait. Bass can see it, they can find it, and they will eat it. Even if every pro and magazine tells you, it's, you know, jerkbait's a clear water bait. It is a clear water bait. It does great in clear water, but it is sneaky good in dirty water. And I think that that's been proven over the past couple of years with kind of forward-facing sonar and all the people who fish jerkbaits on forward-facing sonar in all different kind of water conditions. Those bass know it's there, and you can absolutely crush them on it if you're just willing to pick it up and you're willing to throw it. But just another awesome tool this time of year that if you're not kind of fishing that deeper stuff, you know, fishing more flat stuff, and you're kind of looking for something to suspend, let those bass see it, let them get a hold of it, jerkbait is going to be the king above all baits in getting that done. Now, the last one is one that is just, it's a staple in cold water. And for me, it became more of a staple in cold water when I really started to figure out cold water grass fishing. Now, if you live on a lake or live anywhere near a pond or a lake that has a bunch of grass in it, this is a bait that you got to have tied on. It's one that you've got to fish, and that is going to be a lipless crankbait. I mean, this thing right here, this time of year, is a cold water killer. And on these highland reservoirs, you can definitely catch them on a lipless, you know, especially in the spring as the water starts to warm up. You got a lot of these fish that start to transition up. They start to want to spawn, and you can go roll this thing through 4 to 5 foot of water on these big mud flats, these big gravel flats, these nothing flats where these fish like to spawn and crush them. But that's not the time of year that we're in right now. Right now we're in super cold water time of year. And like I said, on these grass lakes, whether it be Gunnersville, Nickajack, Chickamauga, some of these other lakes that I have around me that have grass in them, on these big grass flats where these fish are wintering, where they're just hanging out, where they're not wanting to move much, but they're still there, lipless crankbait absolutely kills it. And what I like to do is exactly what my buddy Mikey Balls talked about in a recent video. He actually, I think, just put it out a couple days ago, and I watched it pop up, and I was like, Mikey's always on them, and he loves to catch them on a lipless, just like I like to catch them, which is just slow rolling it through those grass patches and through those big grass flats, and when it starts to get hung up, ripping that bait out of that grass, getting that bait to flutter up, kind of start to fall down, and then go again. And a lot of the times, like the crankbait, like the jerk bait, you know, it's that suspension, it's that violent action up, that kind of, that, you know, almost pause at the top. That's when those fish are going to take full advantage of that bait, and they'll absolutely crush it. And that's what I love to do with this bait this time of year. And you'll notice both of these baits are actually in kind of shad and or translucent colors, and that's because a lot of the times winter fishing, you're going to have super clear water because cold water, that sediment settles. There's not as much activity on the lake. A lot of that kind of biomass and that plankton and all those things that grow during warmer months aren't growing right now. And so a lot of that settles to the bottom. You don't have that growth, so that water clears out. And especially in grass lake, that water can be super, super clear. And so these more translucent kind of shad patterns are a great way to get those fish to bite because they're just not super intrusive. They're not overwhelming. They look really, really natural, and that's what I've just found to be the best. Now, you talk to me in March, and I'm going to tell you, you need to be throwing red, and if you're not throwing red, you're a dummy. But right now, cold water, clear water, more natural colors are going to be the key to getting those fish to bite. But absolutely love the trap. These are both the new Berkley Jack Lipless crankbaits. These things are really cool because that's actually a 3/4 ounce bait. Not very big at all, but it's still 3/4 of an ounce. So that means you can absolutely bomb it out there. You can keep it down in the strike zone where you want to keep it, be able to rip that thing really hard, get it to pop up out of the grass, and just do everything that you want to do. And I mean, even this bad boy right here, little bitty guy, little bitty guy, that's a 1/2 ounce. Really, really cool little bait. Awesome that they've been able to pack that much weight into those small profiles like that, because it allows, again, those winter bass, they may be lethargic, they may not be really wanting to eat, but if they see that smaller profile does a really good job of looking like threadfin and different little bait fish, you can get them to absolutely hammer that thing and put some fish into the boat. And if you guys want to see some of these winter fishing tips in action, click this playlist that's popping up right here, and we'll see you guys on the next Bass Fishing Tips video later this week.